Law, Gender and Sexuality, Universities of Westminster and Kent, UK, and also Charles Walls Fellow, British Council, UK. She has worked on the politics of postcoloniality, the writings of Arundhati Roy, and the relationship between literature and social movements. She has closely been involved with the Indian Association of Commonwealth Literature and Language Studies. And she's held office as a treasurer and as a secretary of the association. She's also interested in involving and exploring the intersections of academic practice, political resistance with institutional spaces. And this evening, she will be talking with a lecture, Is Another World Possible? Fault Lines and New Vulnerability in the Pandemic, in our present pandemic. Thank you so much, Dr. Rina. We are so pleased to have you here. We, from Burgos, from Spain, we send our best love to your country right now and the difficult situation, and we appreciate so much you joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sienna. Thank you for your very warm words. And big thank you also to the EURASIA Foundation for inviting me to give this lecture. A big thank you, Sienna, for your very kind words, for your support and your empathy. This is a very difficult time for us in our country, and we do need your prayers, and we have to get out of this, although things are really terrifying at this point. My talk today, there's some sound somewhere, is it in the background?
Yes, students, can you please deactivate the microphone, please? Thank you. And I'm going to share the PowerPoint of Professor Rina. Let's see. Are you seeing it right now? No. No. Okay, I will do it one more time. Now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, perfect.
Thank you. Yeah. So my talk today is actually a critique of the new online teaching modes that the pandemic has forced us into. Now, while these are being justified as emergency measures contingent to ensure an uninterrupted academic calendar of sorts, what it ignores and what it glosses over are the possibility of other alternatives that could have been explored within the precarity of our time. So all those are things that have not even been considered, and we've just been pushed into this, as if nothing has happened, as if, seamlessly we've moved from the offline to the online mode. And, with continuing with the online model of instruction and claiming its success, there's a bypassing also of student demographics that are unable to keep up or respond to its demands. And more importantly, since universities in India had in the last decade attempted bringing in online courses, MOOCs actually, which I'll talk about very soon, to take away from the demand of increasing seats in colleges and universities, to accommodate the increase in student enrollment, online teaching seems to offer a sort of a neat backdoor entry for digital pedagogies to take over. So I'll start my paper now. Um, in this last 1 year since COVID-19 entered our lives and infected our world, a semantic reordering of our vocabularies has also simultaneously taken place to keep up with its recall. While usages of pandemic popularized terms such as social distancing, super spreaders, spring from the danger and vigilance necessitated by the times, some others, like work from home and online teaching, seem to circulate in far more benign contexts. In fact, both work from home and online teaching had always been positioned as possibilities. And with the latter, universities in pre-COVID times had sought its mainstreaming through MOOCs and other ICT-enabled instructional formats. Sienna, if you could show the second slide, please. So this is, I don't know if you're familiar with what MOOCs are. MOOCs are massive online, open online courses. And as the article that I've excerpted this from says, the depressing and disheartening news about MOOCs. So MOOCs have failed. I mean, there's a it's a story of failure. But despite that, there is an attempt in universities like ours to, to ensure that MOOCs are still around, that we are all invested in MOOC making. In fact, in a lot of the recruitment as well as promotion forms that we fill out, we are supposed to mention if we have drafted any MOOCs, if we have any MOOCs to our credit. That goes into our academic profile. Despite the fact that the world over there is, documented failure of MOOCs. So the first slide just talks about the failure of MOOCs. Never known to waste a crisis, neoliberalism's answer to a raging pandemic and the increased precarity of human life was to ensure the wheels of industry were kept moving. And thus, within academia, platforms like Zoom, MS Teams, Google Meet were pushed in to soon become household names. University professors, stymied by their lack of what is known as PCK, or pedagogical content knowledge, the crucial administrative technical know-how for using online platforms, were forced to look for whatever quick-fire training they could manage and arrange for themselves. As educators, they were obliged to find creative ways to augment teaching during this time through both asynchronous and synchronous means. The asynchronous would be recorded lectures, reading material, YouTube videos that are shared with students, while synchronous is the more common online interactive mode where a class is taught in real time. So Sienna, if you move to the next slide, these are just, sort of when online teaching had just started, these were the sort of memes that, students were circulating, and we were also, sort of looking at through, humor. The next slide, as you can see, it really sums up the sort of situation that we all found ourselves in. It says, you're telling me my professor who can't stop the YouTube autoplayer from playing the next video is going to teach classes online? This should be good. So this is the kind of predicament that, we found ourselves in. Soon after the pandemic struck, and as early as mid-2020, guides and manifestos for online teaching were spawning off the COVID crisis. And publication houses world over were competitively training their guns at the floundering academic being forced into a technocratic teaching model. An online search for books catering to pandemic-induced needs vis-a-vis teaching reveals titles like, and these are the titles that I found online, just a quick search revealed all these titles. Mastering Online Teaching, The Future is Now. Ultimate Guide for Teachers Prepping Successful Online Teaching. Everything you need to know for teaching with Zoom. And Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal. This last title, Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal, puts all urgencies into the definitive ordering demanded by the times upon us. A drive to thrive in what we should be acknowledging as the new normal. Here, a heralding of epochal change looks to announce the COVID-19 as a black swan moment, a moment that must allow for radical change in the way academia is to function henceforth until deemed otherwise. If you could just show the next slide, please. The black swan moment comes from the black swan theory, which was developed by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his best-selling 2007 book of that title. Black swan is used as a metaphor to describe an event that comes as a surprise, has a major effect, and is often inappropriately rationalized after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. And therefore, with that in mind, it said, for online teaching, this pandemic was truly a black swan. It brought online teaching to the foreground with an emphasis and a scale that even its most outspoken advocates would never have dared to expect. When this pandemic will be over, education and teaching will not go back to the same state as before. This is the kind of claim that was being made for the moment when the shift to online teaching was happening. Interestingly, Taleb himself, talks of his irritation when the pandemic is sort of referred to as a black swan moment. His impatience comes from its appropriation, one that creates easy alibis for institutions, governments, and groups to seize control and undemocratically order change to suit its needs. In imagining the ways that the pandemic is reorganizing social life, Zizek, in his 2020 book called Pandemic, COVID-19 Shakes the World, draws attention to the division of work between essential and contingent labor. The former would be work that serves necessary is of course in quote marks, necessary immediate needs like healthcare, food delivery and haulage, and security services. On the other hand, those working in education or the arts with work that is reflexive, contemplative, would be considered less significant, not urgently essential, since the long-term gains of educating students would only play out in a seemingly distant future. Zizek talks of how work that is specifically invested in humanization, like the arts or education, have in the pandemic been discounted of their value. And yet, the devaluing of their labor has in no way exempted them from capitalist cycles of production, which continue to operate within systems of schedules, deadlines, and productivity. Thus, both students and teachers are expected to continue as cogs in the neoliberal machine with limited breaks for self-care, breaks that most crucially not impede the system's functioning in any way. An internalized neoliberal capitalism dictates that even during a crisis of the coronavirus, health concerns take a backseat to productivity, since the measure of human life depends on its utility. This responsibilizing of the individual and the privatizing of social problems while broader systemic concerns continue unchecked is, of course, how neoliberalism controls and directs lives in the face of social chaos and disorder. While remarkable and heartwarming stories of care and solidarity networks have been reported since the COVID-19 virus began to spread in the world, Barbara Prinsnack reminds us that, and this is a quote of hers, focusing only on solidarity at this level risks ignoring more important systemic and structural factors. We need to address the causes of inequality and strengthen solidaristic institutions. Unquote. Institutionally across universities, the Maslow before Bloom precept, though typically applied within contexts of school-going young adults, would certainly create metrics of accountability and care among both teachers and students, seen flailing against the demands of what have now come to be called pandemic pedagogies. Now there are 3 slides, Sienna, 6, 7, and 8. What is Maslow before Bloom? I think Sienna said that she's spoken about the Bloom taxonomy to you. I'm just going to very quickly go over it. The American psychologist Abraham Maslow and Benjamin Bloom were noted for their behavior theories that continue to impact the way teachers structure their courses. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is often depicted as a pyramid with 5 levels. Each level contains basic human needs. In order to reach a higher level, the needs listed in the lower tiers must first be fulfilled. What Maslow's hierarchy of needs tells us is that students need food, water, shelter, safety, and the ability to rest before they can even begin to focus on academics. Put another way, a student experiencing trauma doesn't have the emotional bandwidth to focus on school because their energy is directed towards their basic needs. One's math grade is not nearly as important as knowing where one's next meal is coming from. Bloom developed what is known as Bloom's taxonomy, a system of classification of educational goals and objectives. There are, according to Bloom, 6 levels of academic tasks. These range in complexity and spell out the work of the academic classroom. Tasks from rote memorization to organizing information to creating and testing new ideas are represented. The phrase Maslow before Bloom suggests that before students are mentally equipped to do the heavy lifting that comes with learning new things, their Maslow needs must be attended to. And this is from a website that I've cited in the slide. Meanwhile, in countries of the global south, the Wealth and Prosperity Index also plays out more starkly during this time of the pandemic. Altered working conditions and earning capacities have pushed a large proportion of student families into economic precarity. Teaching learning conditions in the online mode have warranted scant attention for the strains that both teachers and students struggle against. Several students are forced to function without even the most basic tools for their online classes. Laptops and personal computers are more often than not a luxury, and the possession of one does not guarantee unshared usage within a family. Further, in the learn from home mode, constraints of space make it harder upon low-income families to ensure a segregated, undisturbed study space. There is also a gendered burden upon girl students who are expected to negotiate a balance between academic commitments and household chores, one that their male classmates would typically be exempt from. In this, the home as refuge and shelter is also marked as a site reaffirming systemic gendered inequities, and girls who would have experienced greater independence on university campuses outside find themselves policed by their families, both for their online time and their offline lives within the confines of the home. I've just got some slides, Sienna, that are, students talking about their experiences. If we could just, I'll just read those. These are, sort of my own students, and some really heartrending sort of accounts of the way that they've been coping with classes. This is a first-year student of mine, and she says, my mother suffers from epilepsy, so her doctor has advised us to stay with her at all times. I remember I used to live with her at my grandfather's place, and the internet speed was despicable in all rooms, so I had to leave her alone at times. I woke up at 8 every morning and would go to the balcony to catch some network and attend classes, even when it was freezing cold. Even between lectures, if your network leaves you for 5 minutes, you're back to square one, not knowing what the whole lecture was about. Then there's another student who says, here I am, unwell, straining through classes that stand dwindling on a highly unreliable internet. Am I growing? No. Am I learning? No. Am I just in a race to get done with the syllabus? Yes. Then there's another student. He's not in any of the metro cities. He lives in a village. And he says, it is very difficult for me to cope up with online classes as we have only one phone in our family from which my brother also attends his school classes. So I have to give up half of my lectures to manage for both of us. On the top of it, connectivity issues also prevail as being from a small town, electric cuts are huge, which impacts the Wi-Fi connectivity and makes it hard to attend classes on time. The next student account is Atib Huda. Atib is a PWD student, and he talks about, he says, online education is like kaam chalao. Kaam chalao is a Hindi word which means it's just done for the sake of being done without any meaning or any attempt at being fulfilling. As it is just on the phone, continuing our education, which lacks exposure. Online education is not accessible to everyone. Many people don't have laptops and smartphones to classes, and they don't have proper internet connection. Many PWD is persons with disability, students are not able to access such technologies from which they could attend online classes. It is therefore creating a digital divide between rich and poor. There are many serious health effects of online education like headache, loss of vision, etc. And this is again another student, Abhishek, who again lives in a really small village in Bihar. And last year, they were, his village was flooded. Last year, Bihar experienced very bad flooding. And he sort of was talking to me at that time and telling me about how impossible it is for him to attend class because of the flooding, there's no electricity. And for days, there was no water or electricity. And he says, here are the problems that I had faced during online learning. Interrupted supply of electricity in my village due to flood and the negligence of the government authorities over this. Second, he talks of the lack of good internet connection in my village, no access to laptop or computer because of financial problems, single mobile phone in a family, and the noisy environment in my village. Then the difficulty in making assignments, the student assignments that they're supposed to submit, or taking online exams, as there is no cafe in my village, and it's difficult to take exams through the mobile phone. And of course, he also cites the long hours of online study that creates irritation for the eyes, and how students have often complained about their eyes hurting because of online classes. As you can see, most of these students are talking about access to a single phone. Most of these students don't have access to personal computers or laptops that they have undivided, that they can use without sharing it with their family. So these were some really sort of difficult accounts of students. The next slide actually is a hilarious account that the newspapers carried just last week. It was about a professor in Punjab who decided to hold class in a public bus because he said, and I'm just going to read that. It says, Professor Singh organized a doubt clearing session for his students in the presence of the media, as he said that these students had been repeatedly calling him for doubt clearing sessions of certain topics, but he felt that the students were facing a setback academically by not attending regular classes. So he decided to run classes for them in a bus for the next few days too. Meanwhile, students who had come on the call of the professor maintained that they felt that they were able to understand concepts better through offline teaching rather than using gadgets from home. Some of them also complained that the internet services were not working properly. All right. The digital divide and disparities have created what Maya John, a colleague at Delhi University, cites as educational apartheid, as opposed to what many have seen as a democratizing impulse that scaffolds e-learning modes. Maya John says, quote, while augmentation of digitally accessible learning has been increasingly paraded as the sure shot democratic route to making knowledge available to all, the entrenched hierarchy in the education sector and the propensity of its reproduction through e-learning are conveniently overlooked. And if we turn to the next slide, this is from Maya's article, and she's quoted a McKinsey report. In a McKinsey report titled Digital India 2019, it is evident that out of approximately 525.3 million internet users in India, 390.9 million access the internet through mobile phones. We also have the recent assessments of telecom business and the World Economic Forum that by 2030, up to 80% of internet consumption in India will be through mobile devices. Clearly, the bulk of people who are expected to access e-learning are those who have nothing but smartphones to depend on. There is nothing positive about this, considering the poor quality of mobile internet in the country. And she goes on to say, without addressing the marked inequalities in our society and the pro-corporate policies of the state, Digital India and its corollary, e-classrooms, will continue to reinforce the hierarchy and merely stands to replace certain crucial face-to-face interactions that actually create a public space in which understanding can grow through collective participation of diverse individuals and groups. These include not just the interface between students and their course material, but also the interface of students with other students and students with teachers, all of which are absolutely necessary for those who have inherited educational inequality, are first-generation learners, and come from less conducive learning environments at home. Devoid of these interfaces, e-learning will only perpetuate the ongoing educational apartheid. And this is from, as I said, Maya John's article, Online Education, the latest stage of educational apartheid. In the finest critique that has come out on the COVID-19 authored move to the online mode and its far-reaching ramifications, Debatitya Bhattacharya, in his 2020 essay, Locked Down but Logged In, Connecting to the Futures of Indian Higher Education, cautions against citing the digital divide and how it plays out along caste, class, gender, community, religion, and region as grounds for political resistance against digital education's unequal access. As his brilliantly incisive essay points out, for the state to fund digital resources and dole out monthly data packs, bridging inequities of access is something easily done, especially against the backdrop of, as he points out, quote, the Indian state's intimate partnership with the telecom sector. So whereas Maya's article was pointing out to the inequities of access where, and digital disparities that she was claiming as a kind of an apartheid, Devatitya has a slightly different sort of a position. He says if we only talk about the kind of disparities that are there, then that is something that the state can quite easily rectify by ensuring that families and households have access to data packs and that some kind of dole is given to them. And he says, and I'm quoting from his article, the process is already underway. The final tranche of relief announcements, while in the throes of the pandemic, launched a scheme under which the top 10 universities in the country were empowered to offer online degrees without any regulatory approval or legislative control. Since none of these necessitates investment in physical infrastructure or the costs of their upkeep, the revenue requirements of such courses are expected to be low and predictably shared by a far wider enrollment base than the traditional classroom initiates. On what is popularly termed as cost-sharing basis among end clients, the nation's online transitioning of higher education is touted as imminently cheaper and yet a greenfield investment opening for private edtech capital. The imminent dangers are there as propositions for tertiary education in the draft of the new education policy 2019. If you could come to slide 15, please, Sienna.
Is this one?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And this is again from Devaditya's article. A new national education policy draft came up and proposed a magical formula for ridding the system of its rot. A wholesale merger of physical institutional campuses to a quarter of its current size, while at the same time doubling student enrollments. Till the pandemic provided the fuel in which to douse the public university in its entirety, we hardly notice that the magic in the policy draft was simply the spark of an online slate. A plan for a mass deportation of classroom populations onto digital platforms was afoot, and the global arm around physical distancing merely draped policy intention with the force of fatalism. To that extent, the pandemic has just been cleverly used to foreshutter the gates of a sector that had long been scripted into such a destiny. And as I've cited there on the slide, this is from Devaditya's article, Locked Down but Logged In, Connecting to the Futures of Indian Higher Education in the JMC Review 2020. Further, as he points out, the democratizing impulse is spurious at best, as it comes Trojan horse-like with greater collaterals against disprivileged demographic groups. If you could just move to the next slide, please.
I think that's the last one.
Okay, all right. Okay, maybe that last slide. Okay, all right. I'll just read it. I'll just read it out. This is again from Devaditya's article, Locked Down, and he says, and here he's referencing, disprivileged groups of, especially caste, and he says, when transposed into an Indian context, the social justice claims enunciated by a digital reinvention of the public university will only end up in a consummate perversion by making collaterals out of minority, Dalit, Adivasi, and women enrollments. The policy prescription for such a scenario is to inordinately dilute content and relax testing mechanisms, which would only go on to compromise the credibility of such courses for potential employers and provide no value addition to the skill sets that an incumbent already comes with. Structures of discrimination are thus to be incrementally reified through a social credentialing of unfit, undeserved labor power and bad debts doubled by a plan that professes to democratize higher education. This is from the same article that I mentioned earlier. Okay, and so where does this leave us? Zizek's hope is that in understanding the basic nature of the virus and its will to move and multiply in as rapid an excess as possible, it could shock us out of our unthinking busyness and lead us to think about the way our humanity exceeds the primitive functionalism of the bundle of genetic material on the edge of life. As Mark Featherstone sums it up, understanding the reproduction of the system endlessly into the future and cause humanity to simultaneously recognize its inherent vulnerability and existential freedom to transform its world, unquote. Perhaps we could take from Arundhati Roy's article, The Pandemic is a Portal, that came out last year, and see it not just for its forewarnings, but also for the learning, the hope that can come off this moment. At my university, until a few years ago, we followed an academic schedule that tested students annually and not through semester exams as we do now, and as it is done the world over. During this last 1 year, the need to slow down, to create room for recovery, to mark space for inactivity and delays has been seen and understood as being points that graph the human condition. At the university, we had suggested reverting to the annual mode that would give students and teachers breathing room to enable a learning outside the treadmill of biannual semester examination. The possibility of fewer classes, lighter workload, all of which would take the burden off a beleaguered university. The pandemic need not expose and fuel the plague of neoliberalism, as Henry Giraud says. It could instead give it pause for all of us to imagine a radically different teaching learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rina. Thank you so much for this lecture that is very firsthand, and is I think it's something. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into the reality of how you are struggling in university, and how students, the first account of students. I really think it's very, very important to also listen to them, no? Where we put the focus, right? And so in that sense, I was listening to you, and I was finding a lot of similarities, maybe not so much in terms of financial disparity, even though that is actually changing, because also a lot of families are going through financial struggles, losing their jobs, and maybe Spanish students, or the profile that we have in our universities, do have access to their own laptop, but some of them are lacking in food, and they cannot pay the rent, and they are going to homeless shelters, as I found out some of my students. So I think, this pandemic, as you say, has, in terms of education, has opened new possibilities, but it also is a moment to reflect about all these critical issues that are being made visible. So in that sense, well, thank you so much. I have questions, but I would like also to hear from students. We today, unfortunately, just only a few students. I don't know, hopefully they're okay. But usually we have up to 15 average, and we don't have that many today, but I'm sure that we have the best students as always. So I would love to hear from you. Dr. Rina would like to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments about her lecture, please, as always, activate the camera, and that will be great to start a dialogue and a conversation.
I also just wanted to end by saying that there is a desperate need by universities to showcase the success of online teaching, and as if we've moved, like I was saying, seamlessly from offline to online and everything is fine. It's only in this week that university has suspended teaching, because this last 1 month has been terrifying. As I was telling Sienna before I started my lecture, many of us have lost loved ones. I was just on the phone, and I've just learned that I've lost a colleague of mine. And despite the kind of losses, the kind of deaths, the kind of desperation that is out there, the university continued to function. There were exams that were scheduled, classes were supposed to be happening, and it's only on the side that students were actually just begging us to not take class. I was getting, messages from students all of last week saying that they're at home, their loved ones are sick, their loved ones are in hospital, or more often than not, they're not being able to find hospital beds because the healthcare has just fallen apart, it's just collapsed. And with that, there was also this sort of, constant need to go back to class, because they had to keep up with lessons, they had exams that were being scheduled, which is why when I was talking at the end about changing the academic calendar, it is possible. It's not as if it was not possible. When we could reschedule exams, when we could have open book exams, when we were trying to bring about whatever adjustments, then a very crucial change could have been extending the academic session to what used to be the annual mode. not have two sets of exams in a year, but have one exam at the end of the year. What that would have given us would have been enough time. It would have given us enough classes, which would have meant that at this time when classes are being suspended or class students are not able to come for class, it would have given all of us a lot of room to maneuver our teaching. And that is the annual mode of examination is actually something that our university used to follow until 2008. And after that, because unfortunately in India, we tend to look at the West for changes that we want to bring about here without looking at ground reality. And because the semesterization is how the West follows the academic calendar. That's what was brought into Indian universities. We protested at the university. We protested for a really long time. In fact, our protest went on for more than a year. And we tried to question the rationale behind semesterization when the annual mode really serves the needs of students who come from the kind of backgrounds that I was talking about. But we were overruled, we were not listened to, and the semester schedule was brought in at that time. And that till today is something that students and all of us have been imploring the university that please just go back to the annual mode where we have only one set of exams at the end of the session instead of just 3 months of teaching and then exams, then again another 3 months of teaching and exams, because that is just that all that does to teaching learning is preparing for exams. It gives students no space or room to explore anything outside what is happening in class. And which is what I was attempting to say in my talk, that it's if this is a moment, the moment of the pandemic should also give us the ability to reflect on certain changes that can be brought about into the university, into the way learning is drafted. And there's no better time for that change than now.
No, I am listening to you, and I am thinking at the beginning. I mean, it must be so frustrating that the university that is supposed to, be helping students, it gets so stubborn with the bureaucracy and the deadlines. In Complutense University and I believe in Burgos, when last March everything is stroked that suddenly the timetables varied. The thing was that I think at a national level there was flexibility, and some universities, instead of having the June exams, they moved it to September. So it was a little bit of flexibility on that sense, and I don't remember feeling frustrated as such as a professor, like why it's not helping. So it's really wow. Let's see, students, can you share, for example, your experience also in this context, like online classes with the pandemic? How do you also have experience? It will be great to hear from you. Can any one of you, the ones who are here today, let's see where. Anyone?
Well, hi. My name is
Cristina. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really interesting for me. And I just wanted to say that I completely agree with you that in these times with COVID-19, it has been really, really stressful for some students to adapt to the situation and to see some of our families and some of our relatives in the hospital and to have to do everything. It has been really stressful, at least for me. On the other hand, it is true that at least in the University of Burgos, there is a psychologist who you can speak to if you are really stressed or you have any problems with your family or whatever you want. And also that there are also some professors and some tutors that has adapted in a really good way to your situation. But in general, I consider it really, really stressful, as you said.
Yeah. And thank you, Christina. Thank you for sharing that. It's also, that's another thing that I was trying to say in my talk, that we're all been forced individually to look after our small communities or look after ourselves. What we actually need is a systemic change. We need the institution to change, not just in initiatives that are coming from us individually. Until and unless there's a larger structural change, these are just band-aid measures. I mean, these are just band-aid attempts. These are not going to this is not going to change. Then there'll be another sort of, I mean, this is disaster capitalism. There'll be nothing after that.
Yeah, I agree.
I also think that Christina, you mentioned something that I wanted to also ask in terms of this psychological help. Because it is true that that Universities Burgos has offered right from the very beginning this this assistance, this way of accompanying students. Like you have, like, they offer a phone number to call. So I don't know how is that in your university, and also apart from that, the training of teachers, because Christina has also mentioned that some teachers were able to adapt better and more easily, but also we have to don't lose sight of the fact that we have different generation of teachers, and for some teachers also they're not technological, or they have been delaying their training of technology, and this has like forced them, and so there are different elements to take into consideration. But also, if the university trains, it's important to have a good training of teachers, right? And that also means investment, the same as giving psychological assistance. And then also one thing, like the last thing, has the university provided laptops? For example, I know that in Burgos, and also in Complutense, I know they have asked teachers to kind of monitor our students in that way, and I know that's been offered, to students, those who needed a laptop, or so I don't know, those three things: psychological assistance, training for teachers, and making sure students, have smartphones or laptops in your university.
We did have, I think, a one-day training that was, organized by the university. But mostly, I think we sort of managed with, through family members, because it wasn't. You can't sort of learn everything in a day. So it was only thanks to my son that I understood what Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all the other, ways to get onto the online teaching mode. Secondly, about help in terms of counselors, therapists, psychologists on campus, it's only some universities, some colleges that have a therapist who's there for students, and they don't charge money from students, or even if they do, it's very nominal. But only now in my college that we have a counselor, I think just a couple of months before the pandemic. But I don't, because India is also such a populous country. I mean, there are so many, ours is a large college, it's a large university. So to have just a few counselors for that many students is not easy. So we need an entire team of counselors to be there for students, because there are that many students. And thirdly, about laptops, my goodness, Sienna, even teachers don't get laptops. Leave alone students. Students would never be able to get laptops.
Wow.
The laptop that I work on is my own personal machine. It's not something that I get from the university. And as I was telling you, most students would be accessing their online classes on their smartphones, and these are not very expensive phones. These are not very posh phones. These are just basic phones that they can have an interface for their online teaching with. Most of them don't have their own laptops. Certainly
Wow.
not.
Wow. Wow. And that's also a reflection about this is the very first time in which students could know more than their teacher in terms of technology. Absolutely. I don't know if Cristina or anybody else would like to also share, like, do you have that feeling like that you had to tell us? I mean, even myself, like the beginning, I didn't even know how the teamwork and the team platform. And I know students were telling me, no, you have to go there, you have to do this, so it's like, it's also kind of like a flipped classroom, in terms of roles.
Yes. Which is why I was sharing those memes with you that, the students were making fun of professors who were trying to, wrap their head without technology.
Yes. Hello, Yadira, for joining. And I don't know, Cristina, if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I completely agree with you, Sienna, as one of my degrees is law, and some of the professors that are teaching us, they are really old, so they do not adapt anything to any of the changes. I mean, even if they have courses, even if the university provides them with technology and with some help in order to adapt to these changes, the mentality is not the same and they do not change in that sense. So it is quite difficult for us also.
We are in a transition time, in which at some point everybody will have to be have to have the basics of technology. This is also a time to have a little bit of empathy. Also, I mean, for those who are struggling and it's overwhelming, but also for students. So yes, thank you so much for sharing, Cristina.
Thank you.
Yadira, thank you for joining.
Hello, Dr. Rina, and I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you for the lecture besides the situation. Well, in my case, I am used to the online system because I have been studying for 3 years with this system, and but yes, it was so hard at the beginning. Well, until right now, it's still hard because psychologically we don't know if we are going back to normal, and sometimes I wonder if it is worth carry on studying and continue, And listening to you, we realize that in Spain, especially, we are so fortunate, fortunate. We have all the mediums, all the capacity to follow an online class and studying online. And in the poor countries, people don't have this possibility, and it is sad. It is the gap between rich and poor that you mentioned. Well, it is hard to realize that.
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. The disparities are far greater in our part of the world. Yes, for sure. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Yadira, for sharing this. And also, I want to give you energy and keep up spirits up, because yes, of course, it's worth it. We are living very uncertain and dark times. I mean, and thank you so much for showing your solidarity to Dr. Rina, because it's such a, I mean, we are experiencing unbelievable situations like that, before you would never expect to get a call before working. But we are right now in that situation. Of course, in India is so much worse, and so we are making this such an effort physically, emotionally. I mean, of course, this is about online adaptation, and the focus is on students, but also, professors, like we also, as we say, we have our own burden and our own problems, our own struggles. So it's a difficult time for everybody. And in that sense, I think we will come out stronger. We have to keep up positive, and just by amid all this suffering and all these hard times, just having the commitment to join in a course like that, and also have this dialogue, it means a lot. And of course, I'm sure, I am so sure that life pays off, and every energy and sacrifice will be rewarded. So you have to keep on there. I'm actually, now that we are almost finishing the course, I Yadira, for example, Christina, Virginia, Tello, some others that are here. Sorry if I don't know all your names. They're being very constant. And I also would like to take the opportunity to thank you for that, because again, we forget sometimes that we are coping with so much, we have so much in our plate. So yes, thank you for sharing. Keep up the spirits. We're gonna make it. As you see, we are part of this global community. We all, at one point, if this pandemic brings something visible, is that we are suffering very similar, circumstances. And I guess that in a way brings us together and brings a much more empathy to each other, and brings us closer, I guess, within all this crazy situation. So, well, I thank you so much. I have one student, Lydia. There is one student that has raised her hand. So we are just Lydia. You want to say anything? Yes. Okay. We have also the other. Hello, Patsy. We'll be due in a minute, because we are with Dr. Rina. We're going to wrap up our session with Lydia, because it's very late in India. It's very early in Hawaii, but we need to also let Rina go to sleep. So we will take Lydia's question, and we will wrap it up.
I will be very quickly. First, thank you both, Sienna, for your words, and also thank you, Rina, for your lecture, because it's been very interesting. And I would like to point out that, of course, here in Spain we are lucky because we have more means, but it's not everything like that. Because, for example, yes, in the university, it has been easier to let people to have the means, like computers or even the professors, but it's not the same in the secondary schools and primary schools, because there has been a lot of problems. There haven't been enough computers. Also, there is a lot of problems here with people, as Rina has said. It happens almost the same, because, almost everyone has a mobile phone, but not everyone has computers. And it's not also that, but there is a 10% of the population here in Spain that don't have a good internet connection, or don't have a connection at all. And also, the main problem has been that, yes, people have, in the families, they have computers, but they have one. And sometimes there are more than one in the family that need it at the same time, and it has been a real chaos.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're so right. And of course, we are not taking into account the profile of single parents who are studying a degree. It's like, it's not just young students, that also having, kids at home, and one small place. And of course, so many circumstances. Thank you so much, Lydia, also for bringing your firsthand experience, and also to bring into perspective, right? Sometimes we have this idea that Western countries, or Western, in this case, Spain. But no, as I was saying in the beginning, this also has worsened and has made much larger the gap between the wealthier and the less wealthier, and also the poor, because there are a lot of people who are struggling in Spain a lot. We are still recovering from the financial crackdown, where a lot of people in Spain, lost their jobs, their houses, committed a lot of suicides in Spain. So and now all this, and I think it also has this cultural stigma. A lot of my students are ashamed of talking about the fact that they are struggling with their families. They are ashamed of going to food banks, or it's like there is so much going on, and so yes, we can empathize, and also to see that Spanish students also struggle. With, as you said, Lydia, with internet connection, of course. So yes, all these things that, in a way, well, as I said before, brings us together in our, resilience, in this pandemic. And thank you so much. So, I guess I'm just going to say goodbye to Dr. Rina before I say hello to Dr. Patsy, which is our next guest. And yeah, Dr. Rina, it's been so great to have you here, and especially under these difficult circumstances at times. I have no words to thank you, and for also giving this lecture in this difficult time. So we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. All my our love and prayers to you.
Hello, Patsy.
Yes, you can say.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, hopefully we'll be able to meet at a decent time in person, all together, hopefully soon. Okay, thank you so much, Rina. All right, and so we have now our next guest. Let's see, Patsy, you blacked out. Hello, Patsy. Oh, here you are.
Yeah, it's such a bad connection, but I'm hearing, most of the conversation. So it was so nice to catch the tail end of the presentation and the questions.
Oh, thank you so much, and good morning. Good morning to you, because I know it's super early, and thank you so much for joining in such an early morning. So thank you very much. And so I think if it's okay with you, we're just gonna get started. And
sure.
Okay, and I am going to introduce you to the students, and then we will have as we said, 45, 50-minute lecture, and then we can have an exchange for questions and comments at the end. So, okay, students, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you Dr. Patsy. She's an English department faculty member at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. She teaches online and face-to-face courses in journalism and media writing, and as well as English composition, rhetoric, and other courses. She holds a Master in Education and a PhD in Learning Design from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and she focuses her teaching related research and practices on English education and studies, instructional design for F2F and online learning, and culturally relevant resources in education and Japanese American immigrant history. She serves as UA Hilo Faculty Congress representative for the Humanities Division, and she is a member of the subcommittee of lowering student expenses. She has been awarded as the Koichi and Tainu, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, sorry for that, Taniguchi Award for Excellence and Innovation, and Chancellor Excellence in Teaching Award. In addition to writing the graphic novel Hamakua Hero, A True Plantation Story, which is about an early immigrant, Gatsu Goto, she's writing now and producing a documentary film about it. She's very active in the community, and she serves on boards and administering scholarships for several organizations dedicated to education and youth. Well, it's such a great pleasure to have you today. Dr. Patsy's lecture today is titled Resilience and Solidarity Amidst a Global Pandemic. Thank you so much, Dr. Patsy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jen, for that wonderful introduction. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good, good. So now how do I share my screen? Oh, right here? Okay, open
Yes,
share.
On the top.
Desktop.
Yes. You know where is the next to the mic, to the microphone icon?
Okay. Do you see this now? Okay, good, good, good. Okay.
Yes. So
okay, now I'm going to view and do a present. Okay. Okay, well, hello, everyone. My name is Patsy Iwasaki, and I want to thank you and welcome you to my presentation, Deadly Encounters, Social Responsibility Past and Present. I really wish I could be there in person. However, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to keep us in lockdown and severely limits our travel even more, you know, even if it's 1 year later. My deepest regards and sympathy goes out to all of you who are dealing with. Is it okay? Can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Perfectly.
Okay. So again, my deepest regards and sympathy goes out to all of you who are dealing with this crisis and who may have experienced illness or loss of loved ones due to the virus. So let me begin by saying aloha to all of you. And aloha is Hawaiian for hello. You know, it's a greeting, much like hola in Spanish. So let me give you a greeting called the shaka sign as well. I don't know if you can see my my photo because I'm just seeing my. Okay, I'm just seeing my screen right now. So
I see you perfectly, and we see
Okay, good. So this is a hand gesture of friendship that, like aloha, has many meanings such as hello, right on, thank you, take it easy, you know, all very positive. It's a gesture that even our 44th president, Barack Obama, who was born and raised in Hawaii, often used to link him to our 50th state of the United States. And I want to thank the One Asia Foundation, the University of Burgos, and Dr. Gianna Sotelo for kindly inviting me to take part in this course that seeks to bring diverse perspectives and increase global understanding. I'm thankful that we have this technology that allows us to share, collaborate, and meet virtually despite being thousands of miles away from each other. I am so committed and passionate about global education, cross-cultural and multicultural studies, and about building cross-cultural relationships. This COVID-19 pandemic affecting everyone around the world is truly showing us all that we're more similar than different. Although we come from many different backgrounds, cities, and countries, and speak many different languages, we truly are one human race living on one planet, Earth. And I strongly believe that building relationships, especially cross-cultural relationships, is a universal global truth. I'll be discussing immigration through the lens of an early Japanese immigrant from 130 years ago, who emigrated from Japan to Hawaii to work on the sugar plantations and how it connects to the current violence and discrimination related to the COVID-19 pandemic against Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the United States today, as well as touch upon other current issues. So I'd like to start off by showing this slide of the very last sugar plantation in the state of Hawaii, which was Alexander and Baldwin's Hawaiian Commercial and Sugar Company that closed down in 2016 in Pu'unene, Maui, on Maui Island. But back in the late 1800s and throughout the 1900s, up until about 1950s, 60s, the production of sugarcane was king throughout the Hawaiian Islands. So to take you back to those plantation days in Hawaii, we're going to have a little icebreaker right now. We're all going to play rock, paper, and scissors. You know, many cultures throughout the world have this easy game to determine outcome. You know, who does what, who goes where. It's very simple. You know, scissors beats paper, paper beats rock, and rock beats scissors. Just those three. There's no, you know, when we were kids growing up, we used to have dynamite. You know, dynamite would beat all these other things. And there's no nuclear bomb, you know, or anything like that too. And the reason why we're playing this is that in Hawaii, this is often called jankenpo, and it's Japanese. And although this may have existed before the Japanese migrated to Hawaii, this game is associated with the Japanese, bringing this game with them to the sugar plantations when they were brought over as laborers during the late 1800s. So it's considered a quintessential plantation game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. How do I do that now?
Yes, then you click again on the sharing. Okay, here you, oh, well, now you're sharing. Okay.
Yeah, now I'm sharing that, but let me see. Do I?
Okay.
Now let's stop sharing. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, stop sharing. Exactly. Okay, got it.
Okay. Okay, so then now do I go back to this now maybe? Or let's see.
Do you want to keep on sharing your slide, or you want to do the game?
No, not right now, not right now.
Okay, perfect. So you want to continue with the slide, right?
Right. And well, no, I want to see everyone's photos right now. If everybody could turn on their screen. Is that possible?
Their camera, right? Okay.
Yeah, their camera.
Students, can you turn on your cameras, please? As Patsy has requested. Okay, you got some students there.
Okay, nice. Good to see all the beautiful faces. Hello.
Hello, students.
Okay, we're going to play this game against each other, very short. And so remember, it's rock, paper, and scissors. So when you're going to play against me. And oh, I can't see everyone again.
No?
I can't see anybody but me.
You cannot see anybody but you. Really? Okay, so let's see, how do I do this? Modo vista.
Okay, now we've got it. Yep.
Do you see everybody?
Nice.
Yeah, but
can
we play there?
Yeah, you can play. What we're gonna do now is you're gonna play against me. So if I do a rock and you have a paper, you'll win. So you stay on with your camera on. But let's say I do rock and you do scissors, then you lose and you turn off your camera.
Okay, let's do that.
So if you lose against me, you turn off the camera.
Okay,
great. And then we're just gonna go like this. We're gonna go John, Kim, Paul. So on 3, we're going to you're gonna play against me and do or choose a rock, paper, or scissors. Okay.
Okay.
So ready, John. Okay, so we will just go 1, 2, 3. That might be easier. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I've got paper.
You got paper.
So everybody who has scissors, if you have scissors, then you win. But if you have rock, then you lose. And if you have paper, you also stay in the game.
And Chelo has scissors, and Cristina, and
right. So,
I don't know. I don't know Julian. I mean, I know Marcos, no, but Julian is there.
We are playing one time each other. Yeah.
Okay, you're with each other. Okay, great. So
if you have paper or scissors, you win. So you stay in the game. You remain in the game. But if you have rock, then you lose and you turn off your camera. So, okay, so we just lost one person, two people. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, wow. So just one person is out of the game. Everybody else is in the game.
Okay.
Okay, now 1, 2, 3. Okay, so scissors loses, paper wins, and rock still wins too. It's in the game. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so scissors, two people are out. Okay, and then we've got our last two. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have our winner to the right of me. Beautiful. So let's see let's see. I did paper. So both of you won. Okay, one more time then. Let's play one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, you know what? We have two winners. We have two winners.
Okay, two
Yay.
winners. Perfect. So Christina and Yadira. Perfect. Okay.
Okay. I hope that kept you up a little bit. I'm going to share my screen again. Ooh.
Okay, great. Yes.
And then, okay, I'm going to go back to this. Oh, okay. Okay, everybody can see my screen. Okay. So thank you so much for playing with me that game. It's rock, paper, scissors called Jankenpo, a game that's associated with the sugar plantations in Hawaii. So the push and pull factors of immigration around the world during the 1800s.
Patsy, sorry, we cannot see your screen.
Oh, all right. Let's see.
I can see myself on your screen.
Let me
You have to turn into your PowerPoint.
Oh, let's see. Okay. Okay. Now, are you able to see?
Yes. Okay.
There.
Great. Now, perfect.
Good. Okay. So the push and pull factors of immigration around the world during the 1800s also applied to Hawaii. Economic recession, political and social instability, and hopes for a better life pushed residents out of their own countries to Hawaii, and the need for workers on the sugar plantations pulled them to the islands. Now you must be thinking, how did the Japanese laborers end up in Hawaii way back then? Here we are in the Hawaiian Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with Japan on the left and North America and the United States on the right. Hawaii is such a very tiny collection of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, so that, you know, some world maps might not even have the Hawaiian Islands on their locations. It is believed that the Polynesians from the Marquesas Islands in the South Pacific used their long-distance voyaging canoes to travel over 3,200 kilometers to settle in the Hawaiian Islands at about 400 to 500 AD. The islands remained isolated for over 1,000 years. Captain James Cook in 1778, an English explorer, and his crew were the first Europeans to visit Hawaii and called the islands the Sandwich Islands after one of his sponsors, the Earl of Sandwich. They were welcomed by the Hawaiians, who traded items for provisions. On their second visit in 1779, back from the Pacific Northwest, Cook arrived during the festival dedicated to the Hawaiian god Lono. So he was very fair, you know, with blonde hair, and so they thought he was the god Lono. They welcomed him as the god Lono, who was associated with agriculture, music, and fertility. But Cook and his men overstayed their welcome. And when a crew member died, the Hawaiians realized they were not gods. They were not gods, but mortal men, regular humans like themselves. The crew left, but returned after a week out at sea because of a broken mast. And so relations were tense when Cook and a group of his men came ashore. A small ship was stolen, a high chief was killed, and the Hawaiians turned on Cook. And he was killed in 1779. In turn, the crew fired cannons at the Hawaiians, and about 30 were killed. After the ships returned to England, news about the Hawaiian Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean started to circulate around the world. About 15 years later, in 1795, a great Hawaiian warrior, diplomat, and leader conquered and united the independent Hawaiian Islands. Each island had its own king. And so King Kamehameha, united the Hawaiian Islands. And as you can and as you can see from this, Okay, and as you can see from this map, the Hawaiian Islands are in a very strategic location in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The United States, okay, and that's why the United States were interested in Hawaii, even at that time. So as you can see from this map, the Hawaiian Islands are in a very strategic location in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The United States wanted a Pacific military base and economic opportunities. And the United States did indeed succeed. A military base was established at Pearl Harbor here on Oahu in 1887, and it became the most important American naval base in the Pacific and home to the US Pacific Fleet. Another success for the United States came a few years later, a success for the United States, but perhaps not for the Hawaiian Kingdom, because a group of American sugar barons and businessmen successfully overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy with a coup. The overthrow of Hawaii's last queen, Queen Liliuokalani, came in 1893. And a year later, the Republic of Hawaii was established in 1894 under President Sanford Dole, one of the leaders of the coup. And 4 years later, in 1898, Hawaii was annexed to the United States as a territory. And I want to share one interesting story between Hawaii and Japan. Back in 1881, King David Kalakaua traveled all around the world, to Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. His travels brought the small island nation to the attention of the world leaders, but also sparked rumors that the kingdom was for sale. Kalakaua also visited Japan for 2 weeks. Many say he was trying to deflect American ambitions toward Hawaii and possibly place Hawaii under the Empire of Japan's protection. So he proposed a marriage between his niece, Crown Princess Kailani, with Prince Higashi Fushimi Yorihito. While the proposal fell through, it's interesting to think that the possibilities if Japan had come under Japanese rule. And in addition to being the first king to circumnavigate the world, King Kalakaua's global tour also had a very important economic purpose. He was being pressured by the sugar plantation owners to find additional labor sources for the extremely lucrative sugar industry that was booming in Hawaii. Growing, harvesting, and processing sugarcane was very labor intensive. Here is King Kalakaua seated right here in the middle with Japanese officials to the left and right. Standing in the back are members of the king's delegation. And this is a photo of Iolani Palace on Oahu. And visitors can take tours of this palace that King Kalakaua built in 1882 in Honolulu after his world tour. He patterned it after the palaces and mansions he saw in Europe, particularly in England. An interesting fact is that he met Thomas Edison in 1881 in New York, and he was fascinated with the new technology of electricity. So Iolani Palace has the distinction of installing electric lights, illuminating the palace grounds for King Kalakaua's 50th birthday celebrations in 1886. And in 1887, the palace had incandescent lights installed within its 104 rooms in 1887. And it's said to be that, so Iolani Palace had electricity before the White House or Buckingham Palace. Why was the sugar industry so lucrative for the sugar barons in Hawaii? The Civil War had prevented the supply of sugar from the southern United States to the northern states. The Reciprocity Treaty of 1875 established a free trade agreement between the United States and the Hawaiian Kingdom that guaranteed a tax-free market for Hawaiian sugar in exchange for the economic privileges and the naval base at Pearl Harbor. And sugarcane is an extremely labor-intensive agriculture industry, and the sugar plantations needed a less costly immigrant labor force. This multinational labor force was successfully recruited from Asian countries such as China, Japan, Korea, and the Philippines. And this is what created the multicultural society of Hawaii that we have today. This slide features the original government contract agreement between the Hawaiian Kingdom and Japan in 1885. It was called Kanyaku Imin in Japanese and First Ship Immigrants in English. It's signed by King David Kalakaua and his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Walter Gibson. And I was able to take this photo when I made an appointment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Roppongi, Japan, a few years ago. This started the mass immigration of Japanese to Hawaii. So there were 26 shiploads of contract laborers under the agreement with King Kalakaua and the Hawaiian Kingdom. By 1924, there were over 200,000 Japanese nationals in Hawaii from many prefectures in Japan. And as this photo shows, many women labored in the fields as well. And immigrants also came from Portugal. Because of their European background, they were assigned supervisory positions. They were called luna and were often on horses, keeping the workers in line with whips. I learned also just last week that there were immigrants from the western part of Spain, Galicia. And I wanted to learn more about them, so perhaps I will. But it was exciting to think that there's also some immigrants from Spain who came to Hawaii during this time period, but I was told that a lot of them left, you know, and maybe didn't remain here in Hawaii. The work was hard, physically demanding labor for both men and women, and the lunas were plantation overseers who typically carried and used a whip to enforce discipline and work. And this is taken from my graphic novel. The first ship of government contract laborers was called the City of Tokyo, and 944 Japanese nationals arrived in Honolulu Harbor on February 8, 1885. And Katsugoto was aboard that ship, and he was 24 years old. And as I mentioned before, I wrote a graphic novel about him titled Hamakua Hero, A True Plantation Story. So what was happening in Japan at that time that would push the Japanese like Goto to Hawaii? After the Warring States period, Ieyasu Tokugawa successfully united Japan and established the Tokugawa shogunate, which lasted for 265 years. In order to exert control over the country, the Tokugawas established a strict policy called sakoku, or seclusion. No one was allowed to leave the country, and no foreigners were allowed into the country except for a few specific ports. And in 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry's fleet, under orders from the United States to establish trade with Japan, arrived at Tokyo Bay. You know, trade at China was very successful, and the United States wanted to enter the Japanese market as well. So with a show of force, the powerful cannons on the ships were pointed at the city along the shoreline, and so the Japanese government had no choice, but grudgingly agreed and signed the Kanagawa Treaty in 1854 that opened up trade between the United States and Japan. The Japanese government then made the significant decision to embrace Western culture and ideology, and this was the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, named after Emperor Meiji Mutsuhito, who ruled from 1868 to 1912. And he was just 15 years old when he became emperor, and his reign was called Enlightened Rule. So the Japanese government wanted to take part on the world stage and close the gap in all areas: technology, government, transportation, education, business, and the military. So scholars were sent out to attend universities around the world and learn from different countries. And foreigners were hired and brought in with their expertise. They looked to England for guidelines in government and architecture, Germany for education, medicine and science, and the United States for military expertise. The Japanese went from a medieval society and agrarian culture, a rice culture, to an industrial modern power in really such a short time. The Japanese government and family industries like Mitsui and Mitsubishi financed all of these expenses. And it was quite expensive to send out scholars and to bring in experts from all over the world. So they overextended themselves financially, which became a severe economic crisis for the country. And what does the government do when they're in trouble? And a lot of them, even now, they enact taxes. The government applied mandatory taxes to all the people. And at the same time, there were several years of poor rice harvests. The combination of the poor rice harvest and taxation caused over 370,000 residents to lose their properties between 1883 and 1890. They sold their properties. Many of them sold their properties in order to pay the taxes. So for the Japanese government, the labor recruitment call from Hawaii was a form of economic relief. The workers would also need to send 25% of their income back to Japan, thus supporting the economy. So for the Japanese, after being isolated for hundreds of years, many caught what was called a broad fever. It wasn't a physical illness, but a fever to see what's out there beyond the confines of Japan. So recruiters advertised, get rich quick, fields of gold, paradise, dreams to the Japanese residents. So at first glance, you can understand why so many Japanese would want to emigrate to Hawaii. The Japanese economy was in a recession, rice harvests were poor, and many residents thought they might do better in Hawaii. And most of the labor recruits were second or third sons. However, the reality for those first Japanese immigrants was definitely not fields of gold, but rather extremely poor living conditions and a labor contract with really meager pay, working for 26 days a month, 10 hours a day that consisted of years of backbreaking labor-intensive work, clearing land, digging ditches, planting, fertilizing, weeding, and harvesting cane. After his arrival in Honolulu, Katsugoto was contracted for 3 years to the Soper Wright and Company plantation along the Hamakua coast, the east coast of the Big Island of Hawaii, near the town of Honoka'a. However, in my research about him, I learned that he was not your typical recruit at all. He was the oldest son in his family, set to inherit the family name and property. He was educated and had quite a bit of English proficiency. So when his contract ended after 3 years, Goto enterprisingly opened up a general store in Honoka'a in 1888, near the plantations where he worked. He became the first Japanese store owner. Prices were competitive and he stocked Japanese groceries and merchandise from Oahu that made the Japanese immigrants closer to their homeland. And Goto's general store quickly prospered. It soon became a gathering place for the, fledgling small Japanese community in Honoka'a. And Goto became a leader for his community. This photo was probably taken when he opened his general store, and it's the only known photo of him. And because he spoke English, Goto became the liaison between the Japanese laborers and plantation management. He advocated for improved working conditions and wages. He facilitated mediation and served as the interpreter. So when the Japanese workers ran into a problem, they would often seek out his help. And on October 19, 1889, several Japanese men were blamed and fined a lot of money for a fire in the fields, although there was no evidence that they had caused it. The men turned to Goto for help with this difficult situation, and he met with them on the sugar plantation to help them, even though he knew he was being targeted by the plantation owner and associates because they believed he was the instigator of the worker unrest. So when he left the men at night upon his horse, he was lynched and his head and neck were severely injured. And then he was hung on a telephone pole in town and he died. He was found hanging on the morning of October 29, 1889. And lynchings were common toward Black Americans in the South during this time period, but this was unusual in Hawaii. So Katsugoto was the victim of a violent hate crime, a victim of the push and pull factors of immigration around the world then and even now. So let's turn our attention to today. The COVID-19 pandemic has directly impacted everyone on this planet and has claimed millions of lives. As I prepared this lecture, the number of deaths has reached 571,000 in the United States alone. That's over 500,000 people. You know, the United States has experienced the most death than any country in the world, although, you know, other countries are experiencing a troubling time right now, especially India. And so while many were celebrating the Lunar New Year and the 2021 Year of the Ox in February, you know, many Asians are celebrating the Lunar New Year, violent crimes were being committed against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and reported in the news media. Because the virus has been linked to originating in Wuhan, China, some people called it the Chinese virus, which has resulted in xenophobic violent behavior toward Asians and Pacific Islanders. New York City alone had an 867% increase in Asian American hate crime in 2020. I'd like to play this short video from CNN, and I hope it works. And I'd like to warn you that and let you know that there are disturbing images in this video. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Okay, here we go. Can you see this? Gianna, can you let me know?
Yes, I'm
Gianna?
Yes. Yes.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it. Yes. Yeah, it's just a website, right?
If you can still hear me, just let me know and then I can play this video.
Yes, I can see it. We can see it. Yes, go ahead and play the video.
Okay, good. Okay, well, hopefully, yes. Okay.
The volume, if you can raise up the volume, please.
Okay,
is the website loading?
It's just loading. It's loading. You know, and maybe I'll keep it small like this so we can see it a little better, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Yes. Now we need to raise up the volume. We cannot listen to the recording. The volume is too low.
There, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we were watching it, but the volume was too low.
Oh, you know what? Hold on. I see what you mean. You know what? I think I need to take this off. So.
Okay, there we go. Okay, the volume is too low. Okay, here we go. Okay.
San Francisco police arrest a man for allegedly assaulting an Asian race. Comes after an alarming rise in unprovoked violent attacks against Asian Americans amid the pandemic. I warn you that some of the video that you are about to see in this special report is upsetting. Kyung La is out front.
Happy birthday, dear grandpa.
Turning 84 was a milestone for Wicha Ratanapakdi and his family.
Oh, happy birthday, grandpa.
The San Francisco grandfather had just received the vaccine and stayed healthy through the pandemic, walking for an hour in his neighborhood every morning. It was on his walk when an unprovoked attacker ran across the street.
How did you find out what happened to your father?
And he told us like they found him, got assaulted. He got injury very bad about his brain bleeding, and he never wake up again. Never see him again.
A 19-year-old suspect is charged with murder and elder abuse.
Patsy? I think you should.
Ratanapakdi's family calls it something else.
This wasn't driven by economics. This was.
Okay, maybe I'll just stop this. But you get the idea.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Okay. You know, I'm gonna just go on. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go on. Okay. Yeah. So, but you get the idea, right? The I mentioned in this video, what is really disturbing is that the crimes are often targeted at the defenseless elderly. The crimes against the 84-year-old male, Wicha Ratanapakdi, and there was another 91-year-old male in the video, but you didn't get to see. But he was also violently thrown to the sidewalk too. And these videos both happened in California. So the escalation has prompted President Joe Biden to sign an executive order against hate crimes and other measures. So many Asian American and Pacific Islander parents are also reluctant to send their children back to in-person school during the pandemic. A September 2020 report by Stop AAPI, so AAPI stands for Asian American Pacific Islander Hate, that found 25% of Asian American and Pacific Islander youth surveyed experienced discrimination, including verbal harassment, social shunning, cyberbullying, and physical assault during the pandemic. And these are photos of AAPI rallies being held. Although we don't have time to discuss in depth, how Katsugoto's lynching connects to all of the current issues today, but it very much connects, its parallels. What happened 130 years ago to Katsugoto parallels what is happening now, in that they are both rooted in sustainability issues, economic sustainability. The migration is still an issue today because there's so many people who are still migrating to different parts of the world because of economic instability in their own countries. And that's what Katsugoto came here too, 130 years ago. But I wanted to get your minds thinking about how this associates and connects with what's going on today. So the Black Lives Matter movement has been such a large and influential movement that has also expanded into issues of racial profiling, injustice, and police brutality, in the United States. And on April 20th, Derek Chauvin was convicted of causing George Floyd's death. And that was a really surprise. People were saying that this was not the usual outcome. You know, that the usual outcome does not have a conviction like this. And, you know, this is also has touched upon injustice and inequity can also cover sexual orientation and gender identity, or the rise of gender neutral terms. And arranged marriages, mail order brides, and different forms of human trafficking continue. And so although Katsugoto's story, you know, happened over 130 years ago, it's still so current and relevant. Migration continues even as we speak all around the world. You know, thousands risk their lives and children are separated from their parents to make a life in America, to pursue their dreams of a better life. So now we come to the part where I get to hear from you, but it's up to you, Gianna, if you want us to continue this, but because of the poor internet connection, maybe, what do you think? Maybe I could just go over this and have people think about this, and, you know, maybe a discussion can happen later, but, or we could discuss it now. What do you think?
Well, I think that it's 8:15, so we can now have time for discussion, and I mean, I think we have 15 minutes for a discussion, for, you know, I mean, we could expand it a little bit, 5 minutes more, but the you know, the lecture is supposed to finish in 15 minutes. So if you want, we can start a conversation with the students if you want to wrap it up.
Okay, what I'm going to do then, I think I'm going to just read through these questions.
Okay.
And just read through, and then I'm going to wrap it up, and then we can have a discussion. Okay. So, you know, these are some things to think about. You know, compare what you know of immigrant life 130 years ago to the life of immigrants today, and discuss the similarities and differences, you know, because sometimes some people will say, wow, it's so different. And some people will say, you know, there's still some similarities and things haven't changed. Number two, I want you to think, this is the part that I really want you to think about is, you know, think about a situation that you consider to be inequitable. You know, it could be personal, it could be family, it could be racial, cultural, age, gender, you know, it could be topical or political. You know, how did it make you feel, and what did you learn from this experience? And it could be something, you know, like you experienced in your family. Maybe you felt that you weren't the favored son or daughter, or maybe you were. Or maybe you felt as a female or male that you weren't being treated or heard with respect. So, you know, inequity can encompass so many different topics and situations. It's not always just racial, you know, that's why I'm bringing up things like cultural, age, gender, topical, political. And also, you know, think about, you know, what are some ways you have tried to bring equity in your own corners of the world? Or do you have ideas on what you could do? And, you know, there is a need for more equitable and just society. And Katsugoto needed it in the past. And Asian American and Pacific Islanders and others, every one of us need it now in the present. We all need it, everyone in this group listening to this, because this applies to any marginalized segment of society, touching upon, as I said, race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, age, physical ability, language, immigration status, so many other ways. And so may I just offer a thought that, you know, any movement or change towards equity and social justice requires social responsibility. And so all of us, no matter what color, shape, or form, need to practice social responsibility to help create a more equitable and just society and world. Because as I said in the beginning, you know, we're all one people living on one planet, facing universal truths of love, joy, family, survival, pain, suffering, struggling, hope, and life. And so this brings me to the end of my presentation, and having these types of conversation and continuing these types of conversations is a real positive step. And my last slide features a riveting Kilauea volcano here on the Big Island when it erupted 2 years ago, and it's still continuing to erupt. And so thank you so much for your kind attention. And we can open it up to any questions right now. And I do hope that one day in the future we'll be able to meet again as we celebrate global cross-cultural relationships.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patsy. It's been a very enlightening lecture. Thank you so much for relating the past with the present and bring awareness to the need to fight systematic racism. How the spotlight nowadays, it may be on Black Lives Matter, and of course it was much more visible in that way. As African descendants were trafficked in a larger scale. But, as you said, discrimination and exclusion is written with the ink of so many different ethnicities in the United States. And so I think it really, by connecting it to the spike on violence against Asian Americans, you actually make visible how all these cycles of violence and exclusion repeat through time, right? As you said, if we don't tackle systematic racism, it's really like a bandage, but generation through generation, it will always surface until we find real transformation, rather than, that's one of my questions now. Before I hope students now please join in the discussion, greet Dr. Patsy, take the opportunity also to share your thoughts on the questions that she offered before. Like, have you ever felt excluded? Do you what are the mechanisms in which you fight for equity in your daily life? That would be great if you can bring that. My question also is in the reflection, like, don't you think there is too much emphasis on change and instead of transformation? Like, what I see is that the rhetoric of change really, things have changed, things are continuously changing, but are we really transforming? That's also one of my focus in my own personal research, this process from radicalization to transformation, in which, thinking about what are the theories, the novels, the artistic, any discipline that how we articulate transformation, something that does not reproduce generation through generation, this division, this inequality. So do you think we're focusing too much on change? Do you see this need for transformation, especially in the context right now of Asian Americans in United States?
Right, because that is so true, that you talk about change, and sometimes change happens systemically, such as different laws or policies or guidelines, but then as you see that it doesn't transfer, that there's no transference of the change from generation to generation. And so some of the Asians and Pacific Islanders that are being targeted might be recent immigrants, but they also might be generations here in America and still experiencing racism and inequity. And so and this has gone on for I think I've been logged out or something.
I can hear some noise, and we've been hearing some noise in the background, like when you want to join in. But I was thinking it was a student, but I couldn't see anyone. But
how is it now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I know. This internet connection is glitchy. I guess, I suppose. It is far, but yes, I'm thinking. Because these crimes against Asians are happening to both recent immigrants and to immigrants that have been here for generations. And so it's not just a systemic change that needs to happen, but one that is within families. I really still think that it happens within the families and within individual people and individual choices. And it depends on how you were raised and how you choose to bring up your family, and hopefully that generation will bring up their family in a certain manner. Because as we all know, politics and systems change so rapidly, and we here in America, our president changes for 4 years. Sometimes they're in position for 8 years, but it just changes so rapidly with an election. And so, like you're mentioning, I think change is good to happen systemically, because that's what gets people to think more. But it happens internally within individual people and individual families. And so I think that's why I really try to emphasize, what can you do as young people in your own corners of the world, and how can you address inequity, and how can you possibly make a difference? Because it's up to you and in your individual families, in your children, that will cause those kinds of changes.
Yes, and actually, along that, the final project for this course.
I don't know if you can still hear me. It looks like it's trying to cycle me back in again. But I'm hoping that you can hear me.
She's frozen. Yes, but we can hear you. We can hear you perfectly. Let's see. Any student?
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Any student would like to please greet or say any comment or question to Dr. Patsy, please? Before we, thank you, Virginia. Go ahead. Virginia has raised her hand.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you now.
Oh, brilliant. Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Dr. Iwasaki. It was very nice to hear all of this information you gave us about Hawaii. Well, I have to say, I love Hawaii. I've never been there, but I'm super, super interested, and I really want to be able to visit. So my question was, how has it been there? How has Hawaii handled the pandemic? Because we know that in the mainland, in the United States, it's been pretty much a catastrophe. But I would like to know how it's been in Hawaii in the matter of infections, deaths.
Oh, we've handled it quite well. I'd like to say it proudly, even, because we haven't had more than, I think, about 450 deaths. It's not that much for our population, and it's because we created a real strict lockdown back in March, and because we're an island country, once they locked down and so nobody could fly in from other countries, we were able to create almost like a bubble. Because in order to get to Hawaii, you need to ride an airplane. You cannot just drive your car or walk across the borders or anything like that. So that sort of helped us create a bubble of protection, and so it's right now, I think there's maybe about 100 something active infections within the whole state, which is not so bad, and the vaccination rate has been really good too. For us, and that's because our population is not so huge, large enough, but because we are separated on different islands. So if you close the borders to each island, visitors can't come in, and people can't go out. But the bad thing is that, you know, we're a state that depends on tourism, and so that really shut down the tourism and shut down our economy. And so now we are slowly opening up, and if people are vaccinated, you know, they can come in, or they can take a COVID test. And so we're slowly starting to get back to our well, it will take a while, I think, to get to pre-COVID levels, because pre-COVID levels we had like over 30,000 visitors come in every day. You know,
every day
we had 30,000 visitors coming into our state, and so now obviously, you know, but I see myself as I go around that the tourists are coming back, and so we're all trying to get used to the fact that we are, you know, opening up and having tourism come back again, and I wish we would try to you know, go beyond tourism to our dependence, our big dependence economically on tourism, to try to do more, you know, technology, and as a place of important, you know, a location, our strategic location is still the same. We're a very important conduit between East and West. And so I would like to see more of that, but I suppose you know, tourism is sort of a easier way to go, you know. But I'm hoping that our leaders are thinking that because of this pandemic, they really need to look for other ways to improve our economy and industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that tourism is really good also for Spain. It's really good, but we shouldn't be so dependent on tourism at this level, because obviously it has affected the economy in so many levels. And as you're telling me that it is around 30,000 people visiting Hawaii every day, I can see how important it is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you.
Gianna, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Virginia, for your question. And I don't know if anyone would like to take this opportunity before we let. Okay, Yadira also wants to say thank you, Yadira. Okay. The mic is like me. It happens like me.
Okay. I just want to comment that Lydia and I are working in our project, and it is based on the hate crimes that we are aware that are happening, especially in the United States, against Chinese population. So
wow, that is so yes. So, yeah, because they have to do. I didn't say that, Dr. Patsy. The final project is around United Nations Sustainable Goals. So actually, some of the questions that you launched the students, they are trying to respond with a final project, like, you know, how can I make a positive impact in my community? How can I, you know, they were tackling different ones, and that's so interesting that you actually did it with this, Yadira. That is so interesting. Yes.
Yeah, that's why personally I enjoyed the lecture.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Right. It's so disturbing. Thank you so much for bringing awareness in your part of the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yadira. Yes, I mean, as a final question, then since we need to wrap up the course, I would also like to ask about this violence against Asian Americans is being felt in Hawaii, or it's just mainly a mainline an insular issue?
That's a good question, because, you know, Hawaii is such a different place, you know, and so unfortunately we have not felt that kind of we have not had that kind of experience here. we have had rallies in support of Asian American Pacific Islanders. And actually this month is Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. And so we're having a lot of different programs. I gave a talk last week regarding this because of that, May is Pacific Islanders and Asian American Month. And but we still get a little bit of touches upon and incidences that are disturbing, and I'm thinking, why would that happen in Hawaii? The one that I'm thinking about is that there was a competition, and a UH team, a UH Manoa team was part of this competition, and I think said some derogatory remarks, and so to another team. And so immediately the president of the system, sent out an email, and these students are being, not fined. What is the word? Are being, they have consequences they have to meet, and they have to go under the student conduct board in order
to retaliated. You mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm glad that that's happening. That there's been actions taken against these students, and these students were not with a UH team. They were students of Manoa, but they were not in a group that was sanctioned by the school. Yeah. And so I haven't read or heard about what happened, but they are, they have to approach the student conduct board, and it has to be, done in a proper manner in following protocol, and they will have consequences. And I'm glad that they, came down on them really hard and quickly.
Yeah,
but
and that's
heard.
Yeah, and that sets a precedent, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then slowly we're starting to somehow, be much more aware of racist language and be less permissive, right? With all that. So I think it's a step towards transformation, this transformation that is needed to change so much racism and so much hate, regardless where we are in the world. So in that sense, thank you so much. It's been so enlightening and very clarifying to also understand, the historical background and, Asian Americans in Hawaii. Thank you for sharing this, bringing these connections with contemporary events and in the context of pandemic. And well, I just want to thank you so much. If it's okay with you, I would like to take a picture. We forgot to take a picture with Dr. Rina, but I mean, she was also, for real, she got a call just before starting the lecture that one of her colleagues had passed away. So I didn't feel like asking for a picture, but if you don't mind, that would be just great.
Oh yes, I would really appreciate that.
Okay, so let's take a picture and then we just say goodbye, and hopefully we'll be able to greet you and host you in Burgos very, very soon next year. So let's see if you can activate the camera, the students who would like to appear in the picture. Thank you, that's so nice. Okay, all right. Okay, perfect. And well, also would like to take the opportunity to thank students for your flexibility with the time, and also to Patsy, because it was so early. And so, well, thank you to all of you who attended and participated, and thank you, Patsy. Okay, so at the count of 3, let's take a photo. Let's smile a little bit. Okay, 1, 2, another one just in case. 1, 2, perfect. Okay, thank you so much to all of you as students, and Patsy. Have a great evening, have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.